Okay,
Okay.
all yours, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you so much. So as I was saying, for the social media ad hoc, we've been able to garner support from a younger population of students who are attending UC Berkeley and are involved in a class called How to Be a Public Health Change Maker. So they are going to be working on a few different projects underneath the umbrella project around social media, doing a Google survey, reviewing the policy for their own thoughts around what might be helpful and appropriate or not appropriate. And they will be reporting into me and Commissioner Shea and Chair Malele. I'll be putting you all on an email today, since this kind of came up quickly. So if the rest of the ad hoc wants to introduce themselves, your name, and perhaps well, I can defer to Commissioner Shea, and then we can go to OPD staff and community, or whatever order you all like.
I'll just go to start us off. My name is Jesse Shea. I am an alternate commissioner on the Oakland Police Commission. And my day job, I am a deputy public defender in San Francisco. Happy to be here. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks,
I'll pass
Jesse.
it to Lieutenant Turner.
There you go, popcorn.
All right. I think, yeah, Lieutenant Joe Turner, I'm with the police department. So I've been with the police department for about 14 years. I'm a proud Trojan, so don't hold it against me though. Yeah, so I worked a lot with the police commission over the last several years. And as part of my job is working at the policy publication unit. So we develop policies and put them out, do some training, things like that. So happy to be here and happy to work with you. I'll pass to Captain Holmgren.
Thank you, Joe. So good evening. My name is Roland Holmgren. I am a commander with the Oakland Police Department. Been there for about 23 and a half years now, so a little bit of time. I oversee what's called our Violent Crime Operations Center, which essentially we are tasked with, specifically going after those that are believed to be involved in significant violent crime, shootings and homicides and stuff like that. I want to say thank you for being part of this process. I think something that came up last week that, I wish, this is my second week with this ad hoc, and I wish maybe would have gotten a little earlier that, in my generation, we didn't have social media and this really wasn't a thing for us, right? But just to see how much, even for younger members of my own department and younger members of society, what an intricate role social media and the technology plays in everyday life. So I think it's a vital component to this conversation. And I thank you for doing what you're doing.
That's great,
I'll
Commander Holmgren. Thank you. Who are you
pass
gonna
it to Ann.
We've apparently got two Ann Jenks on this.
I had to share my link with Peter Pursley to get him on.
No problem.
So there you go.
Thank you.
I'm the first Ann Jenk, and I'm a community member. And I was particularly interested in the social media policy because I wanted to, if not ensure, at least advocate for broad enough definitions of what we were talking about in terms of social media. And I have a couple of questions tonight about kind of making sure it's broad enough, but also in talking to community members about policing and what happened a couple of years, it was before COVID, so a while ago, when the interim chief dismissed concerns of the community that there were police officers wearing Hawaiian shirts, and the community felt that they were Boogaloo representative. I'm really interested in the conversations about that gray area where a person might reasonably think that what they're doing is not racist and is not offensive, but that it sends a message to large numbers of people in the community that cause concern about what it reflects, and figuring out how we can deal with that within the context of this policy. So I'm thrilled that you all are here, and I hope you can come to some additional meetings.
And to the second Ann Jenks, Peter Presley. I see it was changed.
I got that fixed, yes. Hi, happy to be here. Sorry to be a couple of minutes late. This is actually the third committee that I've served on with respect to the entire reimagining process. And I have a particular focus on excess force. And I'm also trying to focus clearly on, are these going to be effective? Are these going to be effective policy guidelines? Pursuant to the issues that were raised last meeting, which I thought were really appropriate. And I went back through the document, with those issues in mind. Are we really giving the clear message? That's the best we can do with the document. We may not achieve all of our goals, and we can talk about that, but glad to be a part of the process.
So let's see, I see Deputy Chief Lindsay on. Deputy Chief, we were just kind of going around because we have a group of students from UC Berkeley who are going to be supporting us in the development of this or in providing edits and feedback from a younger population. Would you mind providing just a little background about yourself, and then we can get straight into it?
Sure. Drennan Lindsay. I've been with the department for 24 years. I'm in charge of the Bureau of Investigation. And yeah, I'm happy to be here. And I hope that's all that you wanted me to, to say in terms of an introduction. I don't know how much information that you wanted me to provide.
No, that's fine.
Okay,
do you want to be off camera for the meeting, or?
Yes, I'm in my car right now. I'm traveling.
Okay, no problem. I just wanted to underscore for the benefit of the students, Drennan Lindsay is the highest ranking African-American female in the Oakland Police Department. So just want you to know that, well, she looks something like you, Zoe. And, sometimes it's important for us to see ourselves in all kinds of important places. So I just wanted to underscore that. Thank you. Back to you, Lieutenant Turner.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. And thank you, everyone who joined us. So we are live. I don't see we have any attendees just as yet, but I know we did have a little bit of an agenda from Rania, if that's something that you'd like to discuss. Some of the things that she kind of thought about that we could talk about are, so for instance, section C, we can just dive right into the policy. If for the benefit of the guests, we want to kind of talk about some broader issues, that's also possible. That I can share my screen and we can kind of just go over, or maybe just kind of give an idea of what we're looking at. Would that help to sort of set the stage, or do we want to just dive right in?
What's
Can we
everybody?
just start?
Okay.
I think the main thing is whether or not our new guests have seen the policy before. If they've seen the policy, then I think we can dive right in. If not, then we can get a high-level overview.
So to your point, I sent the policy to them over the weekend, but I do not know if they've been able to dive in.
Yes, we have all read over it, and we actually made a group document with questions. So we should be well versed with the policy. Thank you.
See, that is a cow bear for you.
Yes.
Thank you, Zoe.
So we can dive right in. I know we talked a lot about section D and last time, which is kind of the specific prohibitions or guidance. Yes, no, you shall do this, you shall not do that section. This is another important section, section C, which is I think one of the reasons why as the ad hoc we decided to tackle this one next, or talk about it next. Because it talks about maybe some of these things, and I think what Ann was kind of talking about, some of the ways where maybe the department either does not or want to or cannot necessarily give specific rules, but nevertheless wants guidance, or where things are kind of ephemeral, all right? And we're getting more into the ideas and how one should conduct oneself as a member of the local government, as a member of law enforcement, as a professional, et cetera. And so we start talking about some of these general considerations for the use of personal social media. And so as you can see, this has several subsections. The first being that, you know, a little bit of guidance on how personal social media use can still impact the operations of the police department itself. And so, you know, a balancing act between the right to express oneself as a private individual, and then also the other side, where if someone is identified as a police officer or shares these views, or you know, whatever, that can have an impact, and those things can be tied together. And just sort of telling people about what these potential impacts could be. More guidance about that social media content may become public, that personal social media may create safety risks. Unfortunately, in law enforcement, that is something that we have to also consider, is that the idea about security, safety, that there are some people, especially in say undercover or working with violent, you know, persons who are suspected of violence or something like that, that there can be some safety concerns. And so we do want to make sure that that's addressed as well. Also put people on notice of things like the fact that public contents may be reviewed by the department. People's public personas, if you will, on social media, if that is something that's available to the public, or even if it becomes public. Right. And we say even this through becoming public through the efforts of third parties like the press or hackers or authorized viewers sharing posts, that's something the department can and will review. So it's really to underscore that if that content, you know, violates the policy, that the content may lead to discipline. You know, another consequence that sometimes, as Captain Holmgren kind of talked about at the beginning, that maybe younger people aren't aware of, is the idea that social media content can be used to impeach that person in court. The integrity of a police officer is extremely important, especially when testifying in court. And you know, that can be an avenue to put in some doubt into this situation. And that is something that officers have to think about, especially when choosing law enforcement as a profession. Definitely put in here that anything accessed or posted using department resources may be reviewed by the department, whether it's public or private or not. This is also going to be in a little more detail in policy you'll be seeing, or the police commission will be seeing soon, about electronic devices and cell phones. And there's strict prohibitions on using department phones or department computers to access personal social media. But should people use, just like any other workplace, if you're using the workplace computer, it is expected that any content or actions on that workplace computer or device could be audited and reviewed and things like that. And then finally, that there are times when the department may request personal social media passwords or access. This will be typically around investigations or criminal matters, something of that nature. And so there is in the labor code and put into our policy some space for warning and letting the officers know about this possibility and, you know, how that might look. So generally, that is section C. It is, as you can see, a little bit broader and an idea about general considerations, because it is trying to work through some of these issues, and that's what we have. So I think at this time, I'd like to open up if there are any questions or comments, or we can start anywhere you like.
So I can start off just to talk a little bit about organization and flow. I know that when we were originally talking about the command intent section, we talked about what would be, sorry, I violated the first rule of raising my hand. I apologize. But we were talking about, you know, the order in which this is read and what the department wants to get the message across as being the most important thing for people who review this policy to get. And so the question is the first thing we want them to be reading that they have the right to express themselves as private individuals, or should that be perhaps the second part? You know, maybe they should understand that the consequences of social media. I know trying not to be too negative, but also recognizing, like, we don't want them to say, this is your right. By the way, all these things, right? I'll make that note, as well as the different section headers and thinking about what it is that we want the message to get across. I think number one is great. Personal social media use may impact the operation of the department. That's the whole point of this particular section. I think number two and number three potentially could be the department can review these things, right? And then a list of all the different risks that it may come. I think someone reading this might say, this stuff becomes public, it all is public, it's not really a safety risk. But maybe what catches their attention is the department's going to review the social media that you use. And I think that sometimes gets people's attention.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Great point. Others, any other comments, questions, concerns, suggestions? Yes, Ms. Jenks. I think
You are muted.
That's all right. I wasn't being coherent anyway. So in terms of C1, I think that there's a distinction between, something reflects poorly on the department. And the fact is that we're talking about situations that can diminish confidence either in the department overall or in individual officers, right? When the word gets out that an officer was wearing a suit made entirely of Confederate flags, people are going to be talking about that in the neighborhood that he's assigned to. And it diminishes, yes, the confidence in the department, but it also very directly influences many community members' confidence in that officer, which I don't think kind of is fully reflected in this. I would argue that that first sentence has already been addressed in the opening thing and probably just should be removed, because you're either going to remove it or you're going to add the other language that everybody has so many titles. I forget what Darlene Flynn's title is. Very important person. Right, where there was the other language saying, yes, you have this right, and it can very negatively affect your career, right? So, I mean, I would argue it's addressed elsewhere. But this thing about it can influence the community's perception of you as an officer, not only overall in the department, I would say. That was kind of the thing in terms of C1 that most struck me.
Okay, so it does sound like there's space here for C1 to kind of be split into two. One where we talk about how personal social media impact may impact or personal social media use can impact the operation of the department, which is relatively anodyne and can probably be a little bit more straightforward. And then a section where we talk about that personal social media use can impact a person's image, that member's image, the confidence in them in the community and amongst their peers, et cetera. Because this is a place for general considerations, and that's absolutely a consideration. And it doesn't have to be just things that are sort of blatantly wrong on their face, but even things that may seem like making light of situations, like not working hard or something like that can turn into something that could negatively impact your image and be out there for others to see, when in fact it's just like a private joke between friends or something like that. So would that maybe address the situation, a sort of separate one saying about how the use of personal social media can impact the confidence of the community in you, your image as projected both outside and inside the department, and and how that could then impact your profession and your ability to police and serve the community?
yes, I'm not sure if this is where, and I'm not sure how kind of to address the issue of the things that do exist in a grayer area. There's like the, oh, I've taken a picture of myself in blackface. There's not a lot of people who are going to argue that that was not what it appeared to be. But then there's all this other things in the middle that are very clearly of deep concern to a large number of people in the community. And yet I think there are also people who would argue, oh no, I'm just honoring the heritage of my family who were on the losing side of a war. And so I don't know how to address that. I'm just
Looks
going to call
like,
everybody VIP. VIP Holmgren seems to have an idea.
No, I was just wondering if that could come out and be more specific in the details with those examples. And in training, I think Lieutenant Turner and I were talking about this prior to the ad hoc, is when kind of game planning what training is going to look like, and actually having those kind of gray area scenarios that you're talking about, and actually putting officers and members in the kind of like these reality-based scenarios where this is presented to them in that fashion, and pulling that out of conversation where, yeah, the easy ones that we can see, right, is the blackface example that you're giving, but these other ones that are kind of like, in this middle area for some people, I think we can pull that out in training with very specific, like kind of reality-based like scenarios where we're having members in the training not just sit there and taking the lecture, but actually kind of role playing in some of these scenarios, and then having the students, the other officers and members kind of critique and see these differences. I think we did something like this similar with our procedural justice 2 training, when we looked at the body worn camera language that was being used, right, to community members in a less respectful way. And what we did was we played some of these gray areas out with verbiage that was used, and officers were able to kind of see, like you pointed out, like, yeah, that's it. So I just wonder if that's, if that might work in something like that, instead of, because not having the room to get into the details and for everything like that in the policy.
Thank you. I love that idea. Commissioner Shea and then Ann.
I will defer to Anne, since it's right now on her topic,
Okay,
on this particular topic. Yeah.
okay. Ann? You're on mute still.
I like to stay on mute when I'm not doing well. I do think there's some value to putting 1 or 2 examples in. Because these are things, I mean, there are neighborhoods that if I went into a neighborhood and there was a cop with a Confederate flag or a thin blue line flag, that neighborhood would understand a very clear message from that officer having those emblems. And I guarantee you that the officer, if I said anything to them, they would say, oh no, the thin blue line flag is simply me, blah, blah. And so the issue is, it doesn't matter what your intention is. It's the same thing that we were talking about in terms of, oh, it was just a joke last meeting. The issue is, no matter what you think it is, right? I've had this conversation with many white people over the years about the use of the N-word. And at some point, it just doesn't matter what you think. You've been told not to use it and you ought not, right? And so I'm just wondering if, in talking about the gray areas and telling people that they need to think about how that reflects in the communities that they serve, you want to give a couple of examples and say, there are things that people feel very differently about. And you need to, when you're reflecting these if you want to reflect these kinds of things, you have to be aware that it's not necessarily going to be heard in the way that you're going to argue that you intended to be heard. And I think you're right that doing it in training is probably the most valuable way to have a more complex conversation, but my question is it worth having a couple of? Because otherwise, we're just using a lot of words.
Yeah. I like the idea of examples.
Okay. Yeah, examples are definitely good. They do one of the issues, and I think when Captain Holmgren and I were speaking earlier, is examples do, and especially in a sphere like social media, they age quickly. And that's, especially we've seen like how quickly did we see Pepe the Frog go from a fun little character to a neo-Nazi, right? If you weren't paying attention to, Reddit for 2 weeks, you missed it. And then you come back from your vacation and you're like, what happened? Right. So that's sort of the downside. But understanding, yes, we can either use some examples or try and, we definitely are going to either way tie examples in the training, but there's definitely some places maybe where examples, more universal examples can be built in.
That's why I chose the 2 examples that I did, because these are long-standing examples and they're not going away anytime soon. Unlike the Hawaiian shirt or the Pepe the Frog.
Right.
More.
Yeah, I think, okay, yeah.
I'll just go forward and thinking like, I don't think the examples are going to come in this particular section. I think they're probably more well suited for the section D that talks about where there's a specific prohibition of discriminatory posts. I think this is just your general parameters of what officers need to know with respect to social media. And then the next section gets into the actual content that is specifically prohibited. Examples, I think, if we're going to do it, is going to be in there. And we've all seen Administrative Instruction 71, which is referenced here, which does make the use of examples and is quite good. Try to make policies as much self-contained as possible without having to refer to others. I know we're working on anti-discrimination, but I don't want people needing to have to jump back and forth. Although I think in an earlier meeting, we had discussed that the training would likely all go together, or at least very close together.
Yes, it would. Okay. So yeah, I think we did talk about examples. I agree with Commissioner Shea. We're probably are looking at something in section D there. And so that is a good, especially when we're talking about gray areas, understanding that depending on the examples, we really do probably need to get them pretty clear cut. But any other discussion or thoughts on section C and the general considerations around the use of personal social media?
I mean, I think we're trying to cover as many situations as possible. I do think that it's helpful to think back to all the different issues where it has come up, not just necessarily in the law enforcement context, but where social media has been problematic for other organizations, and what lessons we have learned from that. I don't have any specific examples. I'm just trying to fill space right now. But I see that Anne has her hand up.
Going back to C2, and this is an area that I think it might be very helpful, our special guest. The one thing is that this does not address, it's not, in my mind, very clear where it says, anything that you do, even if you make it private. But the other thing is, anything that you do, even if you renamed yourself Pepe the Frog, even if you think you can't be identified because you're not using your name. I mean, that's how half of the people who ended up in DC jail over January 6th got identified as serious. But, you know, when something goes down in Oakland, then there are people who have gotten very, very sophisticated at figuring out who somebody is by connecting the nickname they use on one account with a nickname they use on the other account. So I think that there's a piece missing here, that confidentiality cannot be assured as well, even if you haven't identified yourself.
Yeah, it's almost like there's no such thing as private.
Right. And then I also just had a question about kind of what the definition is. I would add audio to any statements, photographs, video clips, or live interactions. I mean, for me, it's anything that you do electronically, anything you transmit electronically, right? And this is where I get into what's the definition of social media and what's the definition going to be in 5 years. But I would argue for a broader thing, which by the way would also cover texting. It sounds like the cell phone policy is going to be for city cell phones, yes?
Yes, city cell phones and city devices.
So then is texting under the social media policy? Texting
So
on your personal phone?
texting on your personal phone, depending on what the issue was. So that cell phone policy will prohibit the use of personal phones for city business, for instance. So that would be out. So we'd basically be talking about, like, if there was a violation, it'd be some sort of violation around like an AI 71 discrimination or harassment violation, or something, you know, like that, like a, you know, some sort of inappropriate interaction between members and another member, or the member and the public, or something like that. That would be, you know, under one of those other misconduct type sections.
I'm talking about the group chats that get revealed in Oakland and San Francisco that are racist.
Mm-hmm.
They're not directed at employees. They're not directed at city employees. They're very close to social media. It's a group chat, right? And this is why I kind of initially was arguing against the narrow definition of social media, because what's a group chat? What's Snapchat? You know, they're kind of social media, not exactly.
Well, no,
What else
Snapchat
needs to be
is.
addressed?
Snapchat is a social media platform, but group chat is not.
Well, what policy addresses my getting together with 10 other racist friends?
Well, I think it's going to be the
Anti-discrimination
cell phone. Well, anti-discrimination. There we go.
and cell phones.
We're meeting tomorrow.
Yes, we are.
But that's internal. And this is the stuff that ends up in the newspaper, very similar to the way that the social media stuff ends up in the newspaper once it's discovered.
Yeah,
right?
but
It's
for
happened in Oakland, it's happened in San Francisco.
yeah, but for the purpose of this conversation, we do want to stick specifically to social media, though, and then be able to visit that in another policy.
Okay. Commissioner, or sorry, and Anne, were you anything more on your point, or should we move on?
Yeah, I don't really hear the other policy that it's going to be addressed under.
Okay. Yeah, anti-discrimination is a good one. And I believe, like the chair's, or sorry, Commissioner said, we do have our meeting tomorrow. I do think that would be the place, but I do want to respect the commission's wishes and stick with this one.
I certainly trust that, but what we were told is that the anti-discrimination was an internal policy about
So
discrimination within the department.
we'll have a public forum about it next Wednesday, but it very much mirrors Administrative Instruction 71, which covers both internal employees only, but that's both on duty and off duty, which I think is the distinction we're getting at. That is something that we'll see in about a week and a day.
Yep.
And yeah, and we'll get public comment on that, and to the extent that it addresses or does not, and go from there. I did want to second Anne's comments about this section where it is good that we are telling officers and sort of the guiding hand of policy that their social media content, no matter what they do, may not be private as much as they would like to. I think it gets to Commissioner Jackson's sort of interest at the beginning of this, which is just to also tell people what's happening, what's going on, and I'm sure at some point the department members are going to know, because they're going to learn through their investigations how much can get revealed through different methods. But I just wanted to second that. I like this section in that vein.
Commander Holmgren?
And, thank you, Commissioner Jackson. I would say, Lieutenant Turner, having the courts also rule too that once you put something on in the internet, there is no expectation of privacy under certain things. Was there a specific case? I mean, I don't want to get technical in here, but I could have swore the courts have ruled once you start putting information out there that there's.
Yeah, there is definitely like a loss of the expectation of privacy. You know, and I know that's one of the things that we talk about here, that any personal social media or activity that's public or becomes public, you lose your expectation. And that's why we specifically say things like, if it becomes public because of the actions of a third party, like hackers, you know, even if a criminal takes over your personal social media account,
Outright.
something unflattering or something where you're engaged in misconduct, it does not matter. So yes. I'm not sure if I know a case offhand, but I'm pretty sure, and I know we've had officers who have said that, yeah, their personal social media has been looked at. You know, so it does. It's a valid defense.
Lieutenant Turner, does it make any sense? I'm sorry about my dog. Does it make any sense to try and find that particular, stop it, T'Challa? Find that particular rule, or, hey, sorry, he wants to contribute to the conversation. As a footnote, maybe, I don't know if it makes sense to do so.
I would say probably not, mainly because, as you know, Commissioner Shea can probably tell you, right? Court case law is specific to those facts and those instances. And I don't want people to think, oh, well, I'm not doing X, so therefore I should be fine, right? You definitely want, you know, we don't want like the qualified immunity style. We want basically people to be thinking beforehand, you know, and so a broader idea that this could happen, I think is much better than is saying, hey, in this limited circumstance, this, you know, social media became public.
I think
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
I think the principle behind it might be something that goes into it, which is when you're using social media, you are sharing this information with a third party. And when you're sharing information with a third party, especially a private organization, you lose your expectation of privacy, or it is diminished such that privacy interest is gone. And that might be in C2. That talks about how it can definitely be public wherever it ends up in this order. I guess it might be a good time to think about soliciting some input from our Berkeley students, because, you know, this might be horrifying to you, right? Or it might be completely in line with your expectations. What are your thoughts about it?
Zoe, Christine?
Oh, sorry.
Zoe, Christine?
I can go. I'm sorry. I think my hand is raised. So my personal opinion is that anything that you put on social media is public. You can't really deny it. And therefore, when you post, you have to be extra careful, especially when you're in a position of power like a police officer. Therefore, we absolutely should be holding them responsible. I firsthand, in my own community, I'm originally from New York, and and my community has had a history of police brutality. I'm very honest about this. Eric Gardner actually died on my block. So therefore, there's always been this distrust of police officers, and my precinct has been known for having a lot of, I would say, unqualified police officers, and looking at their social media, it is highly inappropriate. So therefore, I am of the belief that whenever you post anything, you have to expect people to view it, and it can't really disappear forever. So therefore, you have to be really careful.
Appreciate you sharing that, Zoe. Thank you.
Yeah, I do have a question also, and I'm not trying to take down the cool points of anyone here, but I think besides the young people here, the rest of us are probably not avid users of social media. And so, from a department command perspective, we also, though, think about, right, those young people who right? I was a college student, right? None of my family's in law enforcement. I had no idea I was going to do this until I did it. And it was, it's definitely an eye-opening experience. It was new, but, my folks and family or whatever were a little bit perturbed by me being a police officer. And so I do want to think about how we open this up to the next generation, this profession. We are searching for members of the Oakland community, members of our disadvantaged communities, people of color, people who have had negative impacts on their community from the police, to become police officers, because that is one of the ways that with exposure and the broadening of this community, that a police department and any sort of organization becomes better. But understanding that we have these young people who are very much more into social media than us. And I don't want to insinuate that you all are proxies for all young people, but how do we balance that, understanding that that generation that we want to join our organization will be more in tune and may feel a little bit more, I'm not sure, may feel some kind of way, I guess, about the amount of scrutiny and control that the department and the city is putting on their social media.
When I think about video resumes, which are becoming a thing, it's also a way to introduce yourself in a professional manner and all that. People want to post those things as well. But everything can't be about entertainment,
I mean, I wonder if there is any information about whether this is something that when officers join the academy, or members or applicants join the academy and learn about all these policies, that they leave specifically because of these particular restrictions. I mean, I don't expect you to know the answer, or because this policy doesn't exist right yet, but it'd be interesting to see or to know what the current recruit class might think about this. Just as a thought, in terms of whenever we start soliciting public comment in a more directed way. I see Anne's hand up, and then DC Lindsay.
Well, our very small pool, what we heard tonight is that at least Zoe is not concerned about understanding what people think based on what they post on social media. I do spend a good deal of time on social media, and one of the places where I spend time is to understand what the public is having conversations about policing and what their thoughts are about policing. And there's always a certain number of people who represent themselves to be police officers in those discussions, not Oakland officers. I know one of the things that I think Chief Armstrong, if he had a wand, would use the wand on is kind of being painted for everything that happens in the country in policing. He's like, but it didn't happen in Oakland, so maybe that's good. So I'm not saying you're Oakland police officers, but the kinds of conversations that happen that involve police officers are very troubling. And it's very hard to imagine that those police officers are not representative of the kind of officers that Zoe was just talking about when they see a video that is really quite indefensible, and you have a police chief standing there saying, yeah, this is looking pretty indefensible. And you have officers in the comments saying he should have complied. And much worse things than that. So, I mean, the fact is that social media does at some point begin to reflect what your thoughts are, and it might be a very valuable window into the perspective. Not everybody should be a police officer. Not everybody has the ideology for it. Not everybody has the personality and the restraint for it. And if we see in their social media that they're having these thoughts, which is the only reason you type those thoughts, then you know, I think instead of viewing it as something negative, in fact, it can be something positive. It's a mirror.
Well, to that point, Anne, you know, as an employer, we are very, very direct about the fact that if their social media pages are in any way, you know, egregious, sexualized, any of those kinds of things, that they can't get hired through us. And we will post, as we've talked about, a few different, show them a few different things that would be, you know, inappropriate, and then show them a few things that would be appropriate. So they have a very good line of demarcation. But, you know, honestly, I think, you know, if the young people are saying, hey, we think that anything you post, you should consider to be public. I mean, that's real, because anytime you let it leave your phone, it's in the cloud somewhere. It's accessible. So I don't know if we should move forward to the next paragraph, or I don't want to get so hemmed up that we can't progress.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And before we move on to the next section, were there any other thoughts on section C? I'll get the sort of next part. I think one of the other things that we can talk about is, because we do have a little bit of time, the definitions, and I know that's something that we can look at there. All right, so let's look at that. We can always come back, but definitions. The definition section is actually pretty small. It's only these two. So social media and personal social media. So, you know, understanding the social media is always changing. Did try and get something that is as broad as possible. So internet-based resources that integrate user-generated content and user participation, to try and really broaden that out. So we have anything, you know, internet-based resources. We're talking about VR, we're talking about gaming, we're talking about, you know, chatting, the comments page on your local newspaper, you know, memes, everything, anything where there's user-generated content or and user participation. And then we talk about personal social media, and this is just to differentiate the use of the social media of members, the officers, and the members of the department, and their personal social media versus the official social media of the Oakland Police Department, which will have separate policies. And then as well, in the same vein, the social media accounts that are used for work-related purposes, like criminal investigation and other job-related duties.
Where'd you get these definitions from?
Well, let's see. So I believe that the social media definition, I think, actually took that from either San Francisco, or it was a combination of San Francisco and maybe New York, but from other policies. So when I looked through and just to try to find and kind of create the broadest one, and then, you know, that especially this part where it says, you know, social networking sites, video sharing sites, wikis, blogs, like I would never would have thought of wikis, but you know, and then added in as many of these sort of apps or programs that I could think of. Obviously, I'm not really like Discord and Twitch is kind of the edge of my like knowledge on this sort of thing. And yeah, so that's mainly where I got. And then the personal social media one was we created that to differentiate these, because I know we were talking about, and we do want to still continue to work on like the official social media of the police department, because we have that draft and want to make sure that we're sharing, pushing things out like missing persons and things like that.
The question in the chat is, how do you see, you describe people commenting on a newspaper article and on a website, let's say it's the East Bay Times, right? On a particular article, how do you see this policy reaching that?
I read it broadly. It's an internet-based resource that integrates user-generated content and user participation. So in the case of an East Bay Times article, internet-based resource, I comment, I say something inappropriate or whatnot, that's user participation, or I've generated that content and I can be held accountable for that. And Anne, I see your hand up.
I do like to, to the extent possible, be very clear with people. And I agree that it's in the broad definition, but I think it's an area where people are very likely to get into trouble. And as such, I think it should at least be listed. I'm not saying that having listed it is going to be the difference between somebody getting in trouble and not, but you're talking about something local, right? You've just read the article. You don't really think about that as a social media engagement. And I agree that it is. That's
What
where
are
I
your
see a lot of virulence.
What are your thoughts about public forums and how that falls into this category?
So public forums like this one, or?
Sorry, my fault. Like there is a internet medium on a like a web page based public forum where people who attend that forum, not like a visual one, but a written one, will post, and then people will make comments as they go down. Does that fall under this category?
Seems to me it does. Internet-based resource with user participation and user-generated content. Absolutely, I would say yes.
Mr. Persley?
Yes, I just wanted to make a little follow-up comment on a topic that I raised a couple of meetings ago in the realm of examples and pointing the way for officers. I threw out the idea of naming offensive organizations that would really be crossing a line. And I thought about it, and in the context of safety, I don't think it's a good idea to name organizations. I think listing the offensive behavior that those organizations engage in is enough. Because it occurred to me that it could be seen as almost like taunting, and we wouldn't want to go there. So I just want to follow up on that.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that. Other discussion? Yes, Captain Holmgren.
Thanks, Joe. I just want to sound a little crazy, but what about, this is what about dating apps and stuff? It's, I hear a lot of younger members, this is how they socialize and meet new people, and they have to generate profiles and stuff. So I feel like it doesn't need to be specifically called out, but I just want to make sure that, it's covered in there, because those images could be taken way off.
Yeah, they really could. I would, unfortunately probably say that that's included. It's an internet resource that's user-generated content, user participation. If someone is putting on a dating app, picture of them in front of a whatever, appropriate, right? It's that's something that they should reasonably understand could become public. because obviously they're seeking out another member of the public. And, so it probably would be. I'm not sure if that's something that we want to discuss one way or the other, because like you said, it's something that is in an internet-based world with, especially in a pandemic and things, that's the way that many people are legitimately connecting. So we want to honor that and understand. I mean, one of the biggest things about running this police department is making sure that our members have robust personal lives so that they don't become, is so engaged in this that it warps their perspective. We want them to be whole people, but we also wanted them to understand that those interactions can have really negative consequences if they're not being smart. So it's I think to your question, I think it would be covered. Whether or not that's something, it's probably something for the training is what I'd recommend.
Gotcha. Thank you, Joe.
Do you think we need to put in something about virtual reality and the metaverse? I mean, it may not be called the metaverse and we may not want to say metaverse, but like, that's kind of where things are trending in this right now. It's sort of developing, and that is, I don't know if it's internet based. I think it is. But it kind of is its own category of internet based resource.
Yeah, I
Just a
feel
thought.
like it's close enough. I feel like there's two things. I feel like we're far enough away from, the metaverse or Ready Player One style things, and we're close enough in terms that they will be based, at least now, on something that we understand as the internet going forward. So regardless that this is relatively future proof in that regard, I mean, if we get in 2 years, everything is, virtual and we're all, staring into screens, we'll definitely need to revisit this policy. But I think we're close enough at this point. But yeah, I do. That's a whole concern for another day. Let's see. Any other questions about the definitions?
What I might ask members of this ad hoc to think about is what other things need to be defined that we've seen in this policy besides social media, besides personal social media.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, so a good thing to think about. Let's see, as I kind of look, that there's also one thing we can kind of look at as we think about that is to think a little bit about training. And, so I'd ask also sort of as a follow-up question to Commissioner Shea's question is, when we talk about things that need to be defined, talk about things that need to be trained and how how we'd like to address some of these things in training. So it is something where, we'll have a policy and then we'll go forward and we'll have examples and some of these things, especially ones that are more subtle or where there's more of a gray area. That's where input could really be useful. So Chief Lindsay, I see your hand up.
Okay, sorry, I was trying to get off mute. So the training piece, just for situational awareness, and this is only because I've been teaching a 2-hour segment in the Sergeant CPT for race and equity, but I really think we should consider training and education that focuses on helping police officers to understand the power and authority that they have and really, kind of remind them of the trust, right? The trust comes from the people and ensuring that as it relates to social media, as it relates to how they conduct themselves as police officers, they need to make the right decisions so that they're not taking away the public's trust. And I guess my mindset, in addition to us training them on the social media policy, is just really giving them tools and understanding of their roles as police officers and how it's important for them to conduct themselves accordingly, both on duty and off duty, so that they're not doing things that would betray the public's trust. So that's just my 2 cents.
That's critical. That's worth a quarter.
Well, thank you for that. I'll take that quarter.
Yeah, no, that's critical. So where, okay, no. Where, Lieutenant Turner, do you think that should go?
Well, let's talk about a little bit. So section E actually is kind of the last section we have, and it's relatively short as well. It's about training. So this one was left intentionally very broad, right? So we talk about the requirements for initial training that newly hired members, either as part of recruit training or within 6 months of hire, receive training. And then that ongoing training that the department should provide that ongoing training regarding that speech and use of social media to all members of the department. But, understanding did that in the idea that we knew there was a lot of this training coming down the pipe. So we do have, for instance, as Chief Lindsay said, we're talking about race and equity in our CPT, which stands for Continued Professional Training. It's required for us. We do it every year on a yearly cycle. It's required for peace officers every 18 months. We do it every year. We're also doing some, I know there was some anti-harassment, anti-defamation training that came in that I think Captain and the rest of the command staff was part of, and the chief as well. And then the Project Reset. So I know there's a lot of these things ongoing. And so one of the things I just wanted to make sure that we had a provision for initial training and for ongoing training, understanding that what this is going to always be a work in progress. So, especially some of those concepts that we talked about, the idea of being a professional, maintaining the public's trust, et cetera, are key and will be probably in every training. I know they're in my use of force trainings. Commissioner Shea.
Thank you. So on this topic of training, and because there is very clear direction about ongoing training, I wonder if there's space in this policy, or we might consider something that Commissioner Jackson mentioned, I think a couple of meetings ago, was having members conduct audits of their own personal social media, or potentially at the end of the training, maybe in a week's time, signing a declaration or some document that says, I've reviewed my personal social media and it comports with this policy. I think that is, on the one hand, I truly appreciate, and thank you, DC Lindsay, for letting us know. I think on the one hand, I think it's very important to give department members a real life situations that they would be in where this policy may come into play. But I think it's another thing to have them conscientiously review their own personal social media to make sure that it comports with this policy, because, sometimes when you're working and then you make that drive home, wherever it may be, hopefully it's short, sometimes it's not, you sort of have that transition, and everything that you forget about or you don't think about. You have that separation, that work-life balance. It's hard, I'm sure, as police officers. It's hard for me as well, but so this may be a situation where we're sort of crossing that, unfortunately, but it is a way to sort of push accountability, I guess, or to set in a different way, maybe not from an accountability standpoint, make sure that members are taking a look and seeing if there is something that maybe seem harmful to a community member who's viewing it, or problematic in terms of direct exam or cross-examination. Of course, I'm sensitive to Anne's points about sort of, we don't want them to say, hide it, right? But, I think that's where the accountability and having them sign the document may come into play.
And to that point, Jesse, because I totally forgot about that, I think that as a part of training, it could be a really cool thing that everybody's doing it at the same time. So it's not like, would you stop? So it's not like anybody is singled out. And if they don't have social media, that's fine. Maybe there are some pictures that could be, taken down from Facebook or Instagram in order for people to rule on whether or not it's appropriate. I do find more these days that men tend to shy away from social media for lots of reasons. But to the extent that a lot of women are using it or what have you, it's still important to make sure that there is an activity that engages everyone at some level.
Yeah, learning activities are really important in any training. I just came back from a training on training and provide learning. And yeah, well, that's one of the things. Adult learning really relies on learning activities and really having a very clear learning objective for the student, and then using those learning activities to bolster that. So I think that's definitely one I noticed. We did have that, giving space for a checkup on things that are otherwise left in the dark until brought to the light. I think Commissioner Jackson used kind of that phrasing last time, and so there's something there as well. I definitely want to make sure we keep a note of that and sort of think about that in the intentionality of learning activity. Yes, Anne, I see your hand up.
These conversations have really brought me back to the idea of having a person within the department who's assigned. And no, Commissioner Jackson, it's not a person who spends their time just snooping on everybody's social media. But when somebody said the dating app, one of the things that you say on a dating app is the race of people who you're interested in.
Oh,
right?
Good point.
And so I think there's a whole bunch here that it's going to get a little bit complicated. And having somebody who spends enough time on it to be something of an expert and read the articles about what other departments are doing and what issues are coming up around social media, I just really continue to think would be valuable. It's going to be very helpful in terms of the training. And I'm hoping that the subject matter expert that originally mentioned it to me as something that they thought was kind of a best practice will be able to argue for it better than I have. But tonight has just really made me remember the reason it might be good to have somebody, because I wouldn't know what to say to somebody who says, am I going to get in trouble if I say I only wanted 8 white girls? Right? I mean, you've got to go somewhere with some of these questions that are going to come up, and you want them to come up, right? And so that really continues to strike me. I do have a comment, and I'm sure I'm out of order in terms of the agenda, but in terms of the reporting language, there's still nothing about what the obligation of a supervisor or management is in terms of reporting. And maybe we could like do a little D13 and we could label it, in honor of the 2020 scandal.
That's
I
If I
tend
were
to
here,
disagree.
wouldn't the judge like to see it?
No, I disagree. I think we want to bury that.
Yeah, we don't want to memorialize it.
Yeah, memorial, that's a better word. But to that point, I mean, if there is, I don't go on dating apps, so I don't know about picking your preferences. But I don't know that this needs to be that. I mean, for example, some people put on their pronouns, I don't, but some people do, not everybody has to. And so when you're doing social media, I'm real quick to say Black Girl Magic because I'm a Black girl. It doesn't mean that I don't like Asian Girl Magic or anything else, right? And I will say it when I'm posting things with folks of different races. But we don't tend to see too much of that unless I'm looking at the wrong social media. Go ahead, Jesse.
To the point about what a supervisor should do, is there an MOR section that we can refer to in a D13?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I did get off topic, didn't I? Sorry.
Sorry.
No, you're
Trying
good.
to bring us
you're good.
back.
No, look, I'm not feeling well, so I'm not paying attention. Thank you.
And then we'll come back.
Yeah, it's actually it's for
Let's not,
any,
we could just go forward.
yeah, it's any member. So anyone who is aware of this. There are other, so in terms of our complaint policy, our misconduct reporting policy, they are specifically, they make no mention of rank when it comes to the reporting of misconduct, because it is the job, and I understand there have been failings in the past, but it is the job of any member, from the chief on down to the officer who was just hired yesterday, to report misconduct should they become aware of it. I think that there may be some space if we want to carve that out as a D13, if we want to say
So we just say all?
all members or members
Yeah,
including
all
supervisors,
members.
all members. So it is very clear though, and it is because we don't want that idea. There are some things, some extra steps that a commander or manager might have to do in terms of notifications, about and putting someone on administrative leave or something like that. But the basic duty is the same for everyone. If there's misconduct, to report it.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Commissioner, I know it's about 20 minutes after 7, but we have gone through the entirety of the policy at least once. I know that probably most people didn't have the chance to really ingest some of the things that Rania sent out earlier this morning. But also, I know that we've also talked about a public forum and some of the things that we're looking for in the future. So I was wondering if possibly, and I'm putting Rania's hat on, if maybe we want to talk about kind of next steps or what you're looking at in terms of our, sort of moving from a public forum, talking about that, incorporating what feedback we might get, and then moving towards looking at agendizing this or where we're going to go in the future.
Yes. So according to the document, I think the public forum is pushed out and we need to bring it back. Especially since social media, we have been meeting for over a month now. We have a forum coming up on anti-discrimination March 9th, but I'm thinking that, if maybe we can think about, the 20s, something like that, like a couple of weeks after that, but in enough time that if there are some really outstanding recommendations made, that you're not pushed to get that cleaned up so that we can review it and it can go to the commission. Because the thought is that if we've got to approve that by April 10th, that means that the information has to be in pretty much by about April 3rd. So I'm thinking if people want to take a look at their calendars to figure out what looks best for them, then maybe we can, Jesse, I'm sorry, is your hand up from, no?
Oh, I mean, on the scheduling issue, it looks like what we've charted out is in 2 weeks working on the next section, and 2 weeks after that, sort of reviewing the final document. But I think we've kind of taken care of 2 weeks
Right.
ahead. So perhaps maybe in a month's time, the March 29th date that we have carved out for this ad hoc, we might consider having the public forum on that date, and moving up our review of the complete document in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. How does everybody feel about that?
That sounds sensible to me.
Okay, and so 6:30 to 8 is the forum time for anti-discrimination. Do we want a similar, 1.5 hours for this one?
Lieutenant Turner is going to be running through it. I do also want to flag that I think the public's going to be very interested in hearing implementation and what sort of training this will be a part of and how it will be trained. So we may need to build additional components for that.
Okay, do we want to then talk about the training pieces at the end or at the beginning, and then go ham on the policy itself? I'm presuming that we want to handle it all on the same day, right?
That
So
would-
how would you all like to?
I think we'd probably say, that we talk about the policy, probably maybe give a presentation and say, hey, this is kind of the policy, talk through, as we normally do for those who join or, first audience, right? As this is what the policy says very briefly. We can then talk about, the training and what we envision the training to be, and maybe a few examples of what that's going to, and then sort of open it up to the rest of the discussion and public forum, if that sounds acceptable.
I think it sounds fine, but I'm putting my Ann Jenks hat on and thinking that we probably would do better to identify what the training and all is going to look like toward the end, so that it doesn't look like we've already made our decisions before we hear any feedback from the community. Just saying. Ann, am I wrong or?
Well, so I'm a little surprised because it doesn't sound like there's really going to be a discussion with subject matter experts.
Oh,
I
yeah,
thought
we
we-
haven't talked about the forum itself yet. We're going to have a couple of subject matter experts. I'm looking for them, and everybody on this panel, if you have any recommendations, happy to, because at first I was thinking, oh, maybe I could use a seasoned, person at Facebook or Twitter, from that perspective, versus people that teach social media or, and I'm open. But
Well,
yeah.
I sent the two in that I was able to locate.
Oh, you sent two people. Okay, great. Thank you. I have lost track, so I will go back to them. And Jesse, are you cool with me just copying you on the invite for them to participate?
Yes.
Okay, great. And thank you for that work. And I think you got ahead of the curve just enough for me to lose track of it. So thank you for the reminder. So the issue is, where is training discussed in this process? And I think perhaps it ought to be discussed after we get the feedback, just unless, Lieutenant Turner, if you have a preference that it goes first.
I don't. I think, we're with we need to see the final product, right? The training isn't going to be done until we have a final policy. And I think wherever we talk about the training, we'll of course qualify that these are kind of our ideas. These are what we've banded about. And it's definitely going to be, when we get new information or the policy change or anything like that, we'll absolutely incorporate that in.
Okay, if nobody else has a challenge with that, I do think that sounds like a better rollout. And then we could get, a run of show together within the next week or so, once we have confirmed these subject matter experts. And I don't know, I'll take a look at both their backgrounds and see if, I think two people is probably fine, unless you all have some other burning desire to have, like I said, somebody from one of those entities or somebody that's just like a master user or something. Other than those two, because normally I think we kind of try to do two.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think, yeah, two is fine.
Okay, great. So then March 29th. And I think we say 6 to 8 because we're going to do like 6 to 7:30, the forum, 7:30 to 8, discuss the training. And if there's no feedback, or if we don't have 30 minutes worth of stuff to talk about within the training, we go home early, right?
Okay, never.
Can you repeat those days and hours?
March 29th from 6 to 8,
All right,
with 6 to 7:30 being the actual forum, 7:30 to 8 being the training,
all
the
right,
ensuing training.
all right,
Is everybody good for that?
all
Roland?
right,
Good for that?
all right.
Thank you. Lauren, I know that you joined a little late. I'm not sure when. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Sorry if I had to talk a little bit low. It's
okay.
I have a little bit of a quiet background. Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm excited to be here. Thank you guys for inviting me. And yeah, I'm really interested in what you guys are doing. And yeah, what you guys are talking about is really interesting. And yeah, thanks again.
No problem. Zoe made some excellent contributions in the first hour, and don't feel like you're pressed to say something in this meeting. But we've now gone through the entire policy at one time, and once these updates are made, I'll be able to send them to all of you students to see what has changed. But it's really critical for us to get the community input before we're looking to tie up things, because oftentimes community suggestions are, it's just a perspective that maybe we hadn't considered, and so we don't want to get too far down the road by interpreting that. And one of our community members, Ann Jenks, has already suggested a few subject matter experts. Lauren, I see you. What did you want to say?
I wanted to ask, have you guys considered maybe thinking of subject matter experts in other fields who have maybe dealt with, I know like teachers like have to go through like kind of they're in like kind of a position of authority. I know one of the people on my team works at like with the EMTs, and I know they also have kind of a policy going forward, and because they're also in kind of like a public position and have kind of similar, not completely the same, but I don't know if that's something to consider. And I know they have their own guidelines and rules and things, and I know the situation isn't completely the same, but I know there can be probably some like things that have worked for them that might be able to be implemented into this.
Lauren, I think your suggestions are excellent. I don't remember the background of the folks, Anne, that you put forward for subject matter experts. If you remember it, would you like to rattle it off? Because I was thinking about going to the actual Facebooks and Twitters and seeing if somebody from their shops could actually talk about, what they've learned, because they're, the data development. But a teacher's perspective, probably for maybe a tech college or even tech high school might be good. But Anne, can you, because I can't remember what the background is.
You're asking the person who can't remember the correct titles for the people that I've been meeting with every 2 weeks. If I remember the background of the two people I found a month ago.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
What they are broadly is they're two people who have written about social media in policing. One, it's not so much social media as it is infiltration of hate groups in policing. And so that there's a little bit of overlap, and I had a long conversation with him, and he had some very interesting stuff to say. And the person from the Urban Institute had done some stuff, I think written a paper specifically on social media and policing. So they're pretty much policing, people who study and research on policing. I just wanted to mention what I still have kind of outstanding, and I did read the document today, but I didn't necessarily get every single thing going on. One of the things that I think is going to be worth addressing is kind of comments about crimes and criminal cases on social media. I think it's an area that happens a lot with police officers. Not surprisingly, they're interested in it.
Yeah.
And I think that it can be really problematic when you start commenting on very hot subjects as they are happening. I mentioned it. I didn't sell it well, but I'm not done. In terms of participating on internet sites where you don't post everything in this language, is where you've posted something offensive. But if I go on the KKK of Northern California Facebook page and I post about my puppies and I post about this and I chat with somebody else who's on it, right? So I'm just a presence on the page. To me, that's very problematic. For not the gray area sites, but the out and out hate group sites, you shouldn't have a presence on them, even if your post, everything in our language is about your post. But what about just you're swimming in the wrong pool here, bad people? And then the other thing is that very early on, I was told not to worry about public expression and other policies because there's a separate policy that was being drafted. And we were told we were going to get a draft as it currently exists of that policy. So we just understand what else is going on that kind of overlaps this, along with any other training bulletins or policies that kind of touch up against this. And sometimes I miss an email, but I don't think we've gotten anything. And I would really appreciate seeing it, even if it's in an early draft form.
Yeah, so one of the things that's come up obviously has been the anti-discrimination. I can send that to you. I'm not sure the name of the other policy that was mentioned. Lieutenant Turner, do you remember?
I believe that we were talking about maybe the directive from the chief around hate groups. You know, I know I did send some things a little while ago on stuff, so I'll search through my emails and find that I sent to you.
Thank you. And then Lauren, to your question, I just sent the superintendent a text asking if she has a social media policy for teachers and or students. So hopefully I'll be able to speak with her in the next day if she doesn't get back to me while we're on this call. Excellent suggestion, though.
The first meeting, we were talking specifically about public expression.
I think maybe
You see, Lindsay?
You know, Commissioner Jackson, you just triggered something for me. I'm just, again, this is situational awareness. But at St. Mary's, that school has like a preface where, you know, in order for you to be accepted, like the program that I was accepted into, it was grounded in social justice, like principles of social justice. And so they actually have a little booklet. And I know this is a lot, but it just kind of, when you talked about policies from, you know, the educational institutions, some like St. Mary's really focus on like, you know, making sure that the people they accept into the program understand, you know, kind of like the direction, the values, the mission statement as it relates to social justice. So I don't know, maybe that could be something down the line, but it just, you know, it made me remember as I went through 3.5 years worth of coursework, just kind of our direction, our vision, our mission for just how we would conduct ourselves in the program and at that university. So just something to think about, because again, I think about mindset and how do we help officers or employees, period, just kind of, you know, govern themselves without just kind of, and I think, you know, Director Flynn, you know, challenged the department about how we change the culture. So I'm kind of thinking about how we, you know, create opportunities to educate where we're, you know, helping people understand the type of mindset, right? Getting them in the right mindset where they're making good decisions. So just, you triggered something.
I think that's pivotal, Deputy Chief. Do you think that you can get an electronic copy of that booklet? Because while there may be some pieces that would apply here in the social media, I'm absolutely certain that there are some things that would apply in terms of the anti-discrimination policy that we're also working on. And just trying to create that social justice kind of culture, you know, that speaks to the power of people's knowledge and their presence and their accountability as well. And, you know, if you don't claim it right from the gate, then it's kind of hard to get at it, right?
Yep, that's true. I'll look and see if there's an electronic copy and myself a deliverable.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so Commissioner, I think we do have some follow-up from our end on an updates and providing that. And I know that looks like we're getting ready for that public forum. So I do think there's some stuff that we'll have ready for our next meeting, and then we'll be ready to go.
Absolutely. Some really, really great suggestions tonight, guys.
Absolutely. So yeah, Chair or Commissioner, but it's force of habit, but yeah, I
Don't
think
say it was a long time.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I don't know if you have any other suggestions, or if I guess I'd sort of put forward the motion that maybe people can get 20 minutes of their lives back.
There you go. I'm all for that. Does anybody have anything burning?
No. No burning.
I see some very happy faces. Get me out of here.
Yeah.
Well,
Good meeting.
I'm sure that the Commissioner Shea and I really, really appreciate the feedback. And again, nice to have the students at the table.
It was great. Yeah,
to hear
great.
the conversation, as well as community and the officers.
Right.
So I think that's outstanding. Commissioner Shea, any parting words? No, get us out of here.
Thank you all.
Okay,
All right.
we'll see you next meeting.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.